really excited to jump in today on this webinar topic of how to stay true to our brand values through your marketing communications, both now during the crisis and then as we reintegrate in the next month or two ahead. We have Patti Larson on the call with us, who's going to be leading our discussion. Patti's the CEO of SunUp Group. She's also heavily involved in the work we do at 1OC and serves on our volunteer council. And she actually gave this same presentation to our CEO forum a couple days ago. So we're really excited to have Patti. This is definitely her wheelhouse, and to jump in and provide some insights. As we go through the presentation, feel free to input any questions you have in the chat box section. We'll have a time of Q&A at the end, and would love for you to ask specific questions. It can be a little bit intimidating to raise your hand or speak up, but this is totally the time to do that. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in there and we will address those at the end. But with that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to you. Thanks so much, Patti.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. Nice to have the sunshine, getting our extra dose of vitamin D. I know, I'm loving it. So really happy to be here. And Kevin mentioned that I did a similar presentation for the CEO forum, but this group gets more in-depth. So don't tell them that. For those that didn't choose to join us today, you get the extra sauce. But yeah, as Kevin mentioned, just, this is all about you and where we can add, support and benefit to you. So just give me a pause or ask a question in the chat box, and happy to take that time out and answer the questions. So in thinking about this presentation and really some of the questions that I'm getting from some of our nonprofit clients and other even for-profit clients, is really this kind of intimidating time that we're going through, in that, wow, is it okay to market and communicate during a crisis? And in doing so, how do we have to change the way we communicate? Not just now, but as Kevin mentioned, in the future. So I wanted to share with you, first off, absolutely, it's more important during a situation like this to communicate and to establish that trust with your key stakeholders by letting them know you're here and you're here to stay. So today we're going to talk through a few different items. How do you stay true to your brand promise? How can you avoid, or should you avoid, going dark? Some key principles of your communication. How do you keep your audience at the forefront of your strategy? How do you consistently emphasize your brand values? Why it's so important to go all in on digital. What you need to do to evaluate your current marketing strategy. And then, let's remember this, it won't last forever. And then open it up for some Q&A. So one of the questions that I asked the CEOs yesterday was, what if we fast forward 2 to 3 months and we reflect on this time that we've all been in quarantine, what is it that you want your customers, your board, your key stakeholders to know that you did? So you as a leader, but also what did your organization stand for during this time? And really that boils down to how are you able to live out your brand promise during this crisis? And did your actions reflect your core values? And then did you communicate them to each of your stakeholders? And how is that conveyed in your communication strategy? And most of you know this, but just want to refresh your brand promise. So many of us think it's your tagline. It's so much more than that. If you think about your brand positioning is really kind of the fertile ground of which you establish, you water, it's the soil that helps your organization grow. And your promise is what I like to call the fruit. So the fruit meaning it's the tangible pieces that your audiences can see, taste, touch. So it's really the experience that they have, whether it's your client that you're serving, whether it's your donor base. The brand promise is all of those things that is comprised about your mission, your vision, your values, your services, how you operate, your employees. What are you doing for them? And so I think it's really important to say, okay, how do we stay true to our values when we are in an upheaval. Interesting, a recent study by Kantar gave some insight into how consumers expect organizations, businesses to act during this pandemic. And not surprised, 75% of the respondents said they felt we should not exploit the health crisis to promote their brand. Well, we probably all can agree that that's not a good thing. At the same time, only 8% felt that companies should stop advertising. It's a pretty minimum number. And 77 expect brands to be helpful during this pandemic and stay true to their values. So there we go. This is how we communicate. So key principles of how do we do that? So be authentic, honest, concise, clear. Don't be afraid to emote empathy. One of the questions that I got yesterday was, is it okay to be vulnerable? Absolutely. I think people want to understand that we too, as business and nonprofit leaders, we have fears and we have needs. And so being authentic and being actually vulnerable is not a bad thing. So the other key point for communication is really focus on keeping your audience at the forefront of your strategy. Some things that you can ask yourself is, how does this affect my donors? How does this affect my board? How is this impacting my staff? And how have their priorities and needs changed? And really be cognizant in our communication about that. And how does this impact or affect my service? If so, how can I best communicate that to my audience? Again, be authentic, and it's okay to be real. One of the things that I think is extremely important, and many of you are probably already doing this, but let's take this time to reach out and ask what their needs are. If you haven't already done so, I suggest you make a personal wellness check-in to some of your top donors. Call your board members, and not to basically to call them and just let them know you care, you're thinking of them, and how are they doing. Write a personal note to say thank you and be that beacon of hope. A fun thing that my daughter, I have a 4th grader, and that we did this week as part of her homeschooling, right? So she wants to get involved in my business. So I let her listen to podcasts and she helps me with work and stuff. But guess what she did this week? She wrote personal notes to our clients to say thank you on our behalf from SunUp Group. Hi, I'm Selah. I'm 10. Just wanted to see hope you're healthy. Wanted to say my mom and I are really grateful for you being a client. And I can tell you those little touches will go a long way and speak to your core values. Keep your team connected, because they are really your biggest asset. In addition to some things that we can do as an organization, we also have to recognize that this is a big opportunity for you to humanize your organization's brand as the leader. So many of you are doing amazing work, but are humble and don't necessarily get out in front of your organization's brand. But guess what? Coming out of this whole crisis situation, we believe the moral compass is going to be reset, and people are going to want that human interaction. We call that humanizing your brand. So the beautiful thing is you can take time now. So now is the time to really show you care through your communication. People are hungry for emotional connection. Statistics actually say that the number of people are gravitating toward video because we can see each other, right? Versus just having the written communications. So anytime you can, get on a FaceTime live video, do a Zoom over just written communications. Now is not the time to go dark. I think some people have a tendency, and in a situation like this, to go what we call into the bunker. No time for the bunker. We really need to be present, and your supporters and your staff need to see you. Communicating and engaging with your audience now, I'm telling you, now is the time. It will separate the leaders from the others when this all subsides. And how we actually handle this, I think, again, goes back to the initial question. What do you want to be known for? Fast forward 3 months that we accomplished and we did during this crazy, crazy period. So how do you communicate in the now? Be honest and clear and be transparent. I think the other big thing that I can't stress enough is be forthcoming and be intentional. It's so easy when we're getting pulled all these different directions to just be more flippant about throwing content on social media, about, sending an email. Step back and actually pause and be deliberate and intentional about what is that message that you want to convey, and how does that reflect your core values. And I think it's right now, people want to know, especially your donors and your supporters, they want to know, what is your game plan to weather this crisis? So get out in front of it and give them the confidence and make it count. These are opportunities for us to communicate versus having to come up with reasons to communicate in a normal setting. So let's talk about more specifics about how do we do that. So now is the time to evaluate your current marketing strategy. We do it for our clients. We schedule on Hootsuite, and we have months from an editorial calendar mapped out. Now is not the time to do that. To let the pre-scheduled content that you had scheduled 2 months ago go out. Make sure you review it and it's more relevant, and that the tone and manner reflects your care and compassion for the current environment. Evaluate imagery and language. We don't think about it in our normal time, but now is the time to really avoid visuals of crowds or people touching. This includes people working in offices or social gatherings. I suggest we kind of stay away from that for now. Reframe some of the marketing language. There are things like get in touch, work hand in hand, get closer to your customers. Some of us may not even think about that, or it doesn't matter to us, but there are people that right now are taken aback by that. So just make sure some of the language and the visuals reflect the time. Same thing, swap out visuals. If you have current or upcoming campaigns, revise the imagery or the timeline. Make sure that we stay ahead of that curve. Be thoughtful and intentional. That seems obvious, right? But I do think even more than and normal times, we need to be more intentional and more thoughtful. Really highlight how your organization can help and emphasize your core values. Don't be afraid to share the work that you're doing. We want to know, and we want to know the impact. And it's not bragging, it's sharing the great work that is being accomplished. And frankly, we need to have some good news right now. I mean, those are wins for those of you that are out in front. You're on the front line, and we want to be able to celebrate with you the good works. And again, it's okay to share your fears and your needs. Someone asked yesterday, they said, I feel like we're supposed to be pulled so well together in these Zoom meetings, and never let them see you sweat. And my suggestion with that is, it's okay. We're human, and more than ever, everybody is sweating now. So it's okay to share that. I think there's a difference between panic and being irrational than being truthful and honest and transparent. So perhaps you get into a bad situation, a bad morning, go for a short walk, and then come back and say, okay, this happened and this is a fear of mine, but I'm going to convey it in a deliberate and meaningful way. So create content that conveys your brand value. So back to what we talked about, what is your brand promise? Clearly convey that and how deeply rooted you are in weathering the storm and doing this by being true to your core values. Clearly convey your benefits and the impact. So you are making an impact. And what does that look like? Again, vulnerable is okay. Be consistent. I can't stress enough that how important it is right now to stay out in front, top of mind, to your key stakeholders, and do that through consistency and relevance. So in the current environment, I mean, I mentioned the Kantar study, but this is interesting, that pointed out that the web browsing is up by 70%. I don't think that that's a shock to many of us that are sitting on the web right now, and social media usage is up by 61% since this pandemic. So what does that mean? Your audience is present more than ever, and you got to go all in on digital. Social media, email newsletters, but revise your strategy. Your strategy needs to change so it's relevant and sensitive to the changes. Stories are awesome, antidotes are great, updates on how you're helping others get through this crisis. And again, honest communications really are paramount now in this current climate, as people are craving for authenticity. Push out content that highlights what you're doing to help others. Reflect on the past and share your impact. It's okay to talk about where you've been and the impact you've made, and where you're going and the impact you intend to make. Embrace things like Facebook Live and Instagram to get the most engagement. Highly suggest you optimize your donation page. Make your donation page as seamless as possible, because if people go to your donation page, they have the intent to give. So, one thing with everybody on their phones now, you need to offer digital payment methods like PayPal, Apple Pay, Amazon Pay, and Venmo. If you're not currently doing that, I strongly recommend that you set that up immediately, because so many more payments are made from your phone versus desktop. Offer monthly payment programs or subscriptions. People right now, I don't know, Kevin, if you saw in the LA Times just this week, it talked about how giving is up. And they were saying like the big donors, 7.8 billion, and during this time, how much charitable giving has increased. So people want to give back and help out during this crisis, but we got to make it easy for them. I wanted to share with you some questions that have come up that I've recently been getting, because perhaps you got the same questions, and then we will certainly open it up for your own personal questions. But is it okay to share success in a crisis? One nonprofit leader, she mentioned that she's really wanting to talk about 2019 and the success that they had, and this all kind of put an end to that. And I encouraged her, absolutely, yes, honest communications are important, and people are craving that transparency. And additionally, people are looking for good news. I think initially we were all stuck in front of the TV waiting for the latest Corona update. And now we're starting to see it lift a little bit, in that people are excited to have good news. So do that through your marketing communications. Don't be afraid to. Another question that's come up is, we had to cancel our gala and we already collected ticket and sponsor donations. What do we do from a marketing perspective? And I can't tell you how important it is, first of all, to create a proactive narrative. So as soon as you're in that situation, make sure that you get out in front of it and communicate with them. Additionally, remind your supporters about the important impact that those funds raised will have, and how you continue to intend to utilize and serve your constituents. So that hasn't changed. Event cancellation does not cancel the need for the services and the programs. And while initially there might be a response like, oh, well, wait, we paid for a ticket, now there's not an event, communicate with gratitude, but don't be shy in letting them know the difference they are going to make, whether that event happens or not. And I think it's important to feel okay that, hey, it's still about the why they were interested. It's not necessarily about that particular activity. Should we fundraise during this time? Yes. which I hope we are all doing that. And online fundraising still can be done. So, I think it's different how we communicate that from our content strategy. I think we definitely need, the successful requests for donations will need to be embedded in kind of that larger expression of mutual support, empathy, and solidarity. And I think that's today, and I think that's also for our future, because I do think that communication has changed and it's going to continue to change. And it definitely needs to, the way that we ask needs to have that empathy in the copy. So what are some creative ways? So for many of us that have had to cancel our biggest fundraisers, there's really a lot that you still can do. We're seeing virtual events. Kevin, I know 1OC is doing some virtual events, which is really awesome. Dinner with a twist. I thought this idea was really cool. So for those of you maybe you've had to cancel your big event, and if you have the volunteers, get them to wear a black tie and deliver meals to the ticket holders. Creative things like that you can still do with gratitude. We've seen some that are actually doing the virtual auctions, and they're using Facebook Live to live stream an auction, which has been successful. And then probably the most popular has been a flash fundraiser. So you have a virtual campaign, maybe a few days long, excuse me, with a start to finish, set a goal, and have multiple communications. And ideally, if you can have a match donor, that's fantastic. Of somebody that will say, okay, if you raise 10,000, we'll match it. The other one that I didn't put on here, but that we recently had success with a nonprofit organization, was the peer-to-peer giving. So where you actually get the board involved, you get the staff involved, and they each have a campaign that goes out to their network. And even if it's, a small amount, people, like I said, people want to, all of this is tugging at our heartstrings. And so I think people are very interested in learning how they can give back and get involved. Sharing, it's not just about the money on the peer-to-peer giving, it's about getting their network involved. Let's see, looks like I had it. The other is now a good time to establish new potential partnerships. Absolutely. You think, again, it's looking for opportunities with other nonprofits and corporations to help you better serve your cause and theirs too. This is not a time where we are territorial in a sandbox. This is the time where we invite others in and say, what can we do for you? A good example of that, I don't know if you know of Dominguez Roth Foundation. So they are a nonprofit here in Orange County, an integrative medicine firm, and they actually help people that can't afford to get integrative medicine services. They help serve that group. Well, Dr. Marcela Dominguez, she had an opportunity to get a bunch of masks as well as gloves and all different things. And she reached out and said, you know of anybody that might be able to benefit from that? And I said, absolutely. I thought of, Laguna Food Pantry and some of the other food pantries where their volunteers need to be protected. And so she's like, great, made the introduction. And now they've got several other things that they're doing together. I can't encourage you enough to look for partnerships during this time. Let's see. And then I think, go back to this question. So 2 months from now, and things are seemingly different or normal, what do you want your personal brand as a leader and your organization's brand to be known for? Did your actions reflect your core values in a time, and how did you communicate that? That's kind of the big headline, I think, as I, if you have one takeaway, to really think through that. And then, I think we all got to remember this is not going to last forever. So it's important that we prepare for the transition, Kevin, kind of what you were talking about earlier, and make sure you have that long-term strategy. Because while others are pulling back, you should create campaigns that you're ready to launch as soon as the time is right. And I love this quote. Out of constraints comes creativity. Out of chaos comes growth. Out of fear comes love. Don't know the author, but so with that, let me just open it up for questions.
And feel free to, you can just unmute yourself and ask, or put it in the chat box. Either works.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Hi, Julie. Yes.
Hi. So first of all, this is such great information. I've been on so many webinars and Zooms. I'm actually really tired of seeing my face on a computer screen, actually. But this has been really, really helpful. I was taking some screenshots and notes, and I know all of us are in the same boat with trying to transition and pivot and during this time. But I wonder your advice on our core program is in elementary schools, and we teach during the day, during school days. And so 100% of our access to deliver our mission halted, obviously with schools closed. And so we brought our team together and thought, okay, well, our mission is to empower kids to change the world. It doesn't say anything about kids in schools. So how do we shift and reach kids where they are? And so for an organization like many that has had to innovate and recreate a whole entire kind of new strategy and program, we're kind of working with, what partners and other nonprofits can we work with and corporate partners, and how do we, expand this program that's free to families at home when we don't have the access like we used to have, which is in the schools with principals, like with district officials. And so what is your advice on being able to spread the word for those of us that are pivoting and now trying to expand and get awareness for participation for our missions when we don't have the access that we used to have in more traditional ways?
Right. Great question. So let me just ask, so I make sure I understand. So are your relationships with the school districts, typically that's who you have the partnership with?
Police departments, fire departments, and school districts, so superintendents and principals. So it's not an after school program. It's a program that's taught in the school during the day with assemblies. So it's a school-based model.
So the need has not changed. It's just the access.
Yeah, the need has grown. I mean, our kids are, like you just said, I highlighted, hungry for emotional connection. Our kids are at risk right now because they've lost all their connections to teachers, coaches, friends. And so it's
Right.
just our model. Now, the school districts that we're in, we're working with the superintendents, and the program is getting out that we've created through kind of their Google Classroom kind of outreach. But, it's now a program kids anywhere could go to. They don't have to be in one of our schools anymore. That was more of a constraint. But I know all of us are doing this, so, trying to figure that out.
Right. So I think, it's such a time of having to pivot, right? And how do you create that message so they know, one, you haven't gone away. You're pivoting and you're ahead of the curve, and being innovative. I think, I don't think because your promise hasn't changed, your brand promise has not changed, your values have not changed. And I think those are firm statements that you need to say. While we look and operate differently, our core values are this and have not changed. And we need your help to help us basically mass communicate this virtually. Mm-hmm. And so, I would think they would be so much more excited about having the help now, simply because it's, like you said, they're vulnerable. It's a vulnerable group. So I think it's okay to say we are doing things different, mm-hmm. but it's still all is true to our core values. And here's the impact. Here's the audience that is in need, and here's the impact we can make. So, yeah. And does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's really helpful. I love what you said about communication, because I've talked to my board, but I haven't put out like a constant contact, kind of was waiting till we had something connected. And there's so much going out there, messages from CEOs about COVID. And I know for someone who follows so many nonprofits, I haven't even opened them. I'm like, we all know it's terrifying, right? And And so I was kind of waiting to have something to share that was measurable and different. I mean, aside from like 1OC and like key, nonprofits that are supporting lots of other organizations, it's been so much messaging. And so this gives me permission to understand why, people do want to hear and the good news and changing it. So this has really been helpful. And my last thing is, will you share that quote again in the chat thing? Because I love that.
Yes, I sure will. Sure will. And I can, if there's anything, I'm happy to share the PowerPoint too. If you didn't get a screenshot of everything, there's anything on here you can have, or, if you want to reach out, if you have a question offline, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. So, there's so much more. It's tough to put it all in a webinar.
No, this has been great.
Thanks, Julia. It's a great question, great insights. Anyone else have some additional questions?
You get a quiet group. The group yesterday, they were a little mouthy. Teasing.
Oh, we have one. Will you share the PowerPoint? Yep, I will be sure to email this recording, and I can get the PowerPoint from Patti and email that to you guys for everyone that was on the call today. And then it'll also be on our resource page probably later in the week, or early next week, I should say.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for this. And I know we were trying to connect before this whole COVID thing broke out.
Yeah.
To support and training. And here I am when I saw it. I was like, I'm getting on this. So I'd love to connect after. But thank you for this great presentation.
Yeah, our pleasure. So good to meet you kind of face to face, Julie. We'll definitely connect when things normalize a little bit. Yeah. And thanks everyone that jumped on today. And Patti, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all these amazing resources with us. I'm so grateful every time I'm on these calls because I learn so much, and just thinking about how we can apply this at 1OC and then in supporting all of our nonprofits. So like I said, I'll make sure to send this recording and the PowerPoint slides out to everyone. And yeah, I hope you guys stay safe and well and enjoy some of the warm weather this weekend.
Thanks, Kevin, for all you're doing. Have a good weekend.
Take care, guys.